I discovered my wife Victoria in my home office with my daughter's fiancé Nathan, hunched over financial documents that had no business being in their hands. The stack of papers spread across my mahogany desk told a story I wasn't ready to hear. My mother's trust fund statements, life insurance policies worth $1.4 million, and legal documents from a firm I'd never heard of called Heritage Legal Associates. "What are you two doing in here?" The words came out harder than I intended, but something in my gut twisted when I saw Victoria's face go pale and Nathan's hands freeze over the laptop screen. "Oh, Chuck, you scared us." Victoria's laugh sounded hollow in the quiet room. "We were just looking at some numbers for the wedding planning. You know how expensive these things get." I stepped closer to the desk, my eyes scanning the documents. These weren't wedding expenses. These were my 89-year-old mother Dorothy's most sensitive financial records, the trust fund I'd spent 30 years building for her care, the insurance policies that would ensure her comfort in her final years. Wedding planning requires my mother's trust fund information? Nathan cleared his throat, his boyish charm faltering for just a moment. "Mr. Brennan, we just wanted to understand the family's overall financial picture, to plan appropriately for Emma and my future together." The explanation felt rehearsed, too smooth. I'd spent 3 decades in pharmaceutical sales reading people, detecting the slight tells that separated genuine interest from manufactured concern. Nathan's eyes darted toward the door, and Victoria's fingers drummed against the desk, both classic signs of deception. "The family's financial picture is none of your concern until you're actually family," I said, closing the laptop firmly. "And Dorothy's affairs are certainly off limits." I should have trusted that first instinct. But when you love someone, when you've built what you think is a solid family foundation, you want to believe the best. You want to think that uncomfortable feeling in your chest is just paranoia, just the protective instincts of an aging father who doesn't want to lose his little girl to some young man. Looking back now, knowing everything I know, I realized that moment in my office was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I understood about my life. My name is Charles Brennan, Chuck to most people who matter. At 64, I thought I had life figured out. 3 decades climbing the corporate ladder at Phoenix Pharmaceuticals, enough money saved to provide for my family's future, and what I believed was a strong marriage to Victoria, my wife of 8 years. My daughter Emma was finishing her medical residency, brilliant and driven like her mother had been before cancer took her when Emma was just 16. Victoria had seemed like a gift after those dark years of single parenthood. She was 46 when we met, a former pharmaceutical sales rep with a warm smile and an understanding of the pressures I faced in the industry. She never tried to replace Emma's mother, never pushed too hard, and she brought stability to our home in Scottsdale. For 8 years, I thought we'd built something real together. Emma had been cautious about Victoria at first, which I understood. Losing her mother so young had made her protective of what remained of our original family. But time softened those edges, and when Emma started her residency at Phoenix General, Victoria was there with encouragement and care packages during Emma's brutal rotation schedules. So when Emma brought Nathan Hayes home 6 months earlier, introduced him as the man she wanted to marry, I wanted to be happy. He was handsome enough, tall with sandy brown hair and an easy smile that had clearly charmed my daughter. He worked in financial planning, he said, helping families secure their futures. He was respectful, called me Sir and Mr. Brennan, and he made Emma laugh in ways I hadn't heard since before her mother died. But something about Nathan never sat right with me. Maybe it was the way his eyes would calculate when he thought no one was looking, or how conversations about money and inheritance seemed to energize him more than discussions about Emma's medical career. He asked too many questions about Dorothy's health, about her living situation at Golden Years Manor, about the family's long-term care plans. "Just being practical," he'd say when I'd catch him probing. "Emma and I want to make sure we can help take care of Grandma Dorothy when the time comes." Noble sentiments. The kind of thing a good future son-in-law should say. except something in his tone made it sound like he was already planning for Dorothy's death rather than her care. The morning after finding them in my office, I drove to Golden Years Manor to visit Dorothy. The assisted living facility was one of Scottsdale's finest. Spacious rooms, attentive staff, and specialized care for residents with early-stage dementia. Dorothy had been living there for 18 months, ever since a fall in her own home convinced us all that she needed more support than I could provide while working full-time. "Mr. Brennan!" Mrs. Patterson, the facility director, greeted me in the lobby with her usual warm smile. "Dorothy's having a good day today. Very alert this morning." I found my mother in her room, sitting by the window, watching the Arizona Cardinals at her bird feeder. At 89, she was still beautiful. Silver hair, perfectly styled, wearing the blue cardigan Emma had given her for Christmas. Some days the dementia clouded her thoughts so completely she didn't recognize me. But today her eyes were clear when she turned toward my voice. "Chuck, honey, what a nice surprise." I kissed her forehead and settled into the chair beside her. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Oh, I'm fine. That nice boy Nathan was here yesterday. He's such a thoughtful young man, bringing me those legal papers to sign." My blood chilled. "What legal papers?" Dorothy's brow furrowed in the way it did when she was trying to pull memories through the fog. "Something about updating my will. He said it was important, that Emma needed me to make some changes so she'd be protected when I'm gone." "Mom, did you sign anything?" "I think so, and the lawyer was very nice. He had a stamp and everything." I kept my voice calm, but inside alarm bells were screaming. "What lawyer, Mom? What was his name?" "Oh, I don't remember. Nathan said he was from that place." She gestured vaguely. "Heritage something. He said you sent him." I had never heard of Heritage Legal Associates. I had never sent Nathan anywhere on Dorothy's behalf, and I certainly had never authorized anyone to change her will. "Mom, listen to me carefully. If anyone asks you to sign papers, again, anyone, you tell them you need to call me first, okay? Don't sign anything without me there." Dorothy nodded, but I could see the confusion creeping back into her eyes. The disease made her vulnerable in ways that broke my heart daily. Someone was taking advantage of that vulnerability, and the someone appeared to be my daughter's fiancé. I spent the next hour with Dorothy, listening to her talk about her garden and the Cardinals and the nice woman who brought her lunch. But my mind was racing, trying to piece together what Nathan might have done, what papers he might have convinced her to sign. When I left Golden Years Manor, I drove straight to my office. Well, former office. I'd been doing consulting work for Phoenix Pharmaceuticals since my semi-retirement 2 years earlier. My old colleague Dave Rodriguez was still there, and more importantly, Dave had connections I needed. "Chuck, you look like hell," Dave said when I knocked on his door. "Everything okay?" I closed the door behind me and sat down across from his desk. "Dave, remember when your brother-in-law got tangled up with that investment scam a few years back? You mentioned you knew someone who specialized in financial fraud investigations." Dave leaned back in his chair. "Private investigator named Sarah Chen. She's good. Used to work white-collar crime for the FBI. Why?" I told him about finding Nathan and Victoria with Dorothy's financial documents, about the mysterious will changes and Heritage Legal Associates. Dave's expression grew more serious with each detail. "Chuck, this sounds like a classic elder financial abuse setup. These guys target families with money and aging parents who might be vulnerable. How much are we talking about?" "Dorothy's trust fund is worth about $3. $2 million. Life insurance is another $1.4 million. Dave whistled low. "That's serious money. Enough to make some people do very dangerous things. You need to document everything and probably contact Adult Protective Services. I need to be sure first. I can't destroy my daughter's relationship and my marriage based on a feeling." "Feelings keep you alive sometimes," Dave said, "but you're right to gather evidence first. Let me call Sarah." That evening, I sat in my home office researching Nathan Hayes online. His LinkedIn profile showed employment at Financial Planning Solutions, a company that claimed to help families with investment strategies and estate planning. The website looked professional enough, but something felt off about it. Too generic, too new, too perfect. Financial planning solutions had been incorporated just 8 months earlier. The company address was a strip mall in Tempe. No client testimonials, no detailed staff biographies, no track record of success stories. For a financial planning firm handling client assets, it was remarkably thin on substance. I dug deeper into Nathan's background. He claimed to have graduated from Arizona State University with a finance degree, but ASU's alumni directory had no record of a Nathan Hayes in their business school for the years he would have attended. His previous employment history was vague, a few jobs at companies that either no longer existed or had no online presence. But the real shock came when I searched for Nathan Hayes in Nevada. The first result that popped up was a marriage certificate from Clark County, Nevada, dated March 15, 2019. Nathan James Hayes had married Jessica Marie Rodriguez in Las Vegas. The marriage was still active according to Nevada public records. Nathan was already married. He had been married for almost 5 years when he started dating my daughter. I stared at the computer screen, reading the marriage certificate over and over, hoping I was misunderstanding something. But the details were clear. Nathan's full name, his date of birth, his social security number. This was the same man who had been coming to our family dinners for 6 months, who had asked for my blessing to marry Emma, who was planning a wedding for next spring. My hands shook as I printed the marriage certificate. Jessica Rodriguez Hayes. What kind of life was she living while her husband seduced my daughter? Did she know what Nathan was doing, or was she another victim? I searched for Jessica Hayes in Nevada and found more disturbing information. She had 2 young children, ages 4 and 6, listed on school enrollment records in Henderson, Nevada. Nathan wasn't just a married man. He was a father abandoning his family to con mine. But the marriage certificate was just the beginning. A broader search revealed that Nathan Morrison, apparently another name he used, had been arrested 3 times in California for fraud-related charges. One conviction resulted in 2 years probation for identity theft. Another case involved forging signatures on loan documents. The pattern was clear and terrifying. I was looking at the profile of a professional con artist who had infiltrated my family. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay next to Victoria, watching her breathe, wondering how much she knew. Was she another victim of Nathan's charm, or was she complicit? The way she'd defended their presence in my office, the smooth way she'd explained away their access to Dorothy's financial information, it all felt too coordinated to be innocent. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and returned to my office. I needed to understand exactly what Nathan and Victoria had been looking at on my computer. My laptop had a browser history that might tell me which websites they'd visited, which documents they'd accessed. The history was revealing and terrifying. They had logged into Dorothy's bank accounts. Somehow they had her passwords. They had accessed her trust fund statements, reviewed her life insurance policies, and researched the process for changing beneficiaries on investment accounts. Most disturbing, they had visited websites explaining how to obtain power of attorney for elderly relatives and how to expedite probate proceedings in Arizona. They weren't just planning to steal Dorothy's money, they were planning for her death. I found evidence that they had downloaded forms for emergency power of attorney transfers and researched Arizona's laws regarding inheritance disputes. They had looked up the average processing time for life insurance claims and investigated which banks offered the fastest account transfers for estate settlements. The browser history painted a picture of 2 people methodically planning to take control of Dorothy's assets. The only question was whether they intended to wait for her natural death or accelerate the timeline. That question was answered when I found the most chilling search in the browser history. Medication interactions that can cause heart failure in elderly dementia patients. Nathan and Victoria weren't just planning to steal from Dorothy, they were planning to kill her. I sat in the dark, staring at the computer screen, feeling my world collapse around me. The woman I'd loved and trusted for 8 years was planning to murder my mother. The man my daughter wanted to marry was a professional con artist who already had a wife and children. Everything I'd believed about my family, about my life, was a carefully constructed lie. But the shock was giving way to something colder, more focused. I'd spent 30 years in a competitive industry where success required strategy, patience, and the ability to outmaneuver people who wanted to destroy what you'd built. I'd survived corporate politics, hostile takeovers, and economic downturns by staying calm under pressure and always thinking 3 steps ahead. Nathan and Victoria had made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated who they were dealing with. I spent the rest of the night making plans. Tuesday morning, I drove to the Adult Protective Services office in Phoenix. The caseworker assigned to Dorothy's case was Linda Morrison, a woman in her 50s who had clearly seen every variation of elder abuse imaginable. "Mr. Brennan, what you're describing is unfortunately common," she said after I explained the situation. "Financial exploitation of elderly family members, especially those with dementia, is one of the fastest-growing crimes in America. The fact that it involves your son-in-law makes it more complex, but not unusual. What can you do to protect my mother?" "We'll open an investigation immediately. I'll assign a social worker to visit Dorothy and assess her current situation. We'll also flag her accounts with the banks to prevent unauthorized changes." "How long does that take?" "That's the problem. Legal processes take time, and from what you're telling me, these people might not wait for our investigation to conclude. If they're planning to harm Dorothy physically, we need to involve law enforcement." Linda Morrison connected me with Detective Frank Martinez at the Phoenix Police Department, who specialized in financial crimes against seniors. Detective Martinez listened to my story with the grim expression of someone who had heard similar tales too many times. "Mr. Brennan, elder financial abuse cases are often connected to larger criminal networks. If this Nathan Hayes is using multiple identities and has a history of similar cons, he's probably not working alone." "What do you mean?" "These operations typically involve several people playing different roles. The charmer who gets close to the family, the inside person who provides access and legitimacy, the document forger who creates false paperwork, sometimes even corrupt professionals like lawyers or doctors who provide official cover." I thought about Victoria's role in all this. "You think my wife is part of a larger operation?" "It's possible. 8 years is a long time to maintain a cover identity, but we've seen deeper infiltrations. The important thing right now is protecting your mother and gathering evidence that will hold up in court." Detective Martinez explained the process for building a case against Nathan and Victoria. I would need to document every interaction, record conversations where possible, and gather financial records that showed unauthorized access to Dorothy's accounts. Most importantly, I needed to avoid confronting them directly until law enforcement was ready to act. "If they suspect you know what they're planning, they might accelerate their timeline," he warned. "That could put Dorothy in immediate danger." I left the police station with a recording device and instructions for gathering evidence. The next phase of my plan required careful acting, pretending normalcy while building a case that would destroy the people who had infiltrated my family. That evening, Victoria and I had dinner at our usual restaurant, a quiet Italian place where we'd celebrated anniversaries and birthdays. She seemed relaxed, affectionate, completely unaware that I knew about her plans to murder my mother. "You seem distracted, Chuck. Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just work stress. The consulting project for Phoenix Pharma is more complex than I expected." "You work too hard. Maybe it's time to fully retire. Spend more time with family." The irony was suffocating. Victoria was talking about spending time with family while planning to kill the most vulnerable member of that family. "Speaking of family," I said carefully, "Emma mentioned that Nathan has been helping Dorothy with some paperwork. That's thoughtful of him." Victoria's expression didn't change, but I caught a brief tension around her eyes. "He's very responsible, always thinking about how to help." "What kind of paperwork?" "Oh, just updating some of her legal documents, making sure everything is current for her care." "I should probably review whatever changes she's making. As her son, I want to make sure her wishes are being followed." Now the tension was visible. Victoria set down her wine glass and leaned forward. "Chuck, Dorothy specifically asked that Nathan handle this privately. She's worried about being a burden, and she wanted to update things without causing family drama." "Drama about what?" "About money, Chuck. About inheritance. You know how these things can tear families apart. I kept my voice level, but inside I was marveling at Victoria's performance. She was smoothly deflecting my questions while making it seem like Dorothy's desire for privacy was driving the secrecy. I think I should still be involved. She's my mother. Of course. And Nathan isn't trying to exclude you. But Dorothy asked him to help because he understands these legal issues and she trusts him. She doesn't want to bother you with details when you're so busy with work. Everything Victoria said sounded reasonable on the surface, but I now understood the manipulation beneath it. She was using my mother's dementia and my work schedule to justify excluding me from decisions about Dorothy's own financial affairs. Maybe I'll mention it to Dorothy when I visit her this weekend. Victoria's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her wine glass. I think that might upset her. Nathan said she's been very fragile lately, getting confused when too many people ask her about the same things. I nodded as if accepting her explanation, but I was mentally recording every word. Victoria was actively discouraging me from talking to Dorothy about the will changes, using my mother's mental condition as a reason to keep me away from the truth. The conversation confirmed what I'd already suspected. Victoria was fully complicit in Nathan's scheme. This wasn't a case of Nathan manipulating my naive wife. Victoria was an active partner in planning my mother's murder. Wednesday morning, I met with Sarah Chen, the private investigator Dave Rodriguez had recommended. Sarah's office was in a nondescript building in Tempe, but her credentials were impressive. 15 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division, specializing in financial fraud and organized criminal enterprises. Mr. Brennan, I've reviewed the information you provided about Nathan Hayes. This case fits a pattern we've been tracking across multiple states. Sarah spread a series of documents across her desk. Nathan Morrison, which appears to be his real name, has been linked to elder fraud cases in California, Nevada, and now Arizona. But he's not working alone. We believe he's part of a larger network that targets wealthy families with aging parents. How many victims? At least 8 that we can confirm, possibly more. The pattern is always the same. A young man infiltrates a family through romance with an adult daughter, gains access to financial information about elderly relatives, then manipulates those relatives into changing their wills or transferring assets. Sarah showed me photographs of Nathan with different women in different cities, using slightly different identities but the same basic con. In each case, the elderly family member had died shortly after changing their will, usually from what appeared to be natural causes or accidents. Martha Goldstein, 78 years old, San Diego, she changed her will to benefit her granddaughter's boyfriend, Nathan Martinez. She died of a heart attack 2 weeks later. The granddaughter inherited $1.8 million and disappeared shortly afterward. Robert Winchester, 82 years old, Las Vegas, changed his will to benefit his daughter's fiancé, Nathan Morrison, died in a fall down the stairs at his home. The daughter inherited $2.2 million and moved to Mexico with Nathan. Patricia Hughes, 75 years old, Tucson, changed her life insurance beneficiary to her niece's boyfriend, Nathan Henderson, died of a medication overdose that appeared accidental. The niece inherited $950,000 and has not been seen since. The photographs showed the same face, the same charming smile, but different names and different victims. Nathan was a professional killer who used romance and family connections to access his targets. How does he find these families? We think he has someone doing research, identifying wealthy families with elderly members who might be vulnerable. Someone with access to financial records, insurance databases, maybe even medical information. Like someone who worked in pharmaceutical sales and would understand both the financial side and the medical vulnerabilities? Sarah nodded grimly, like your wife Victoria. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. Victoria hadn't just fallen for Nathan's charm. She was likely his partner, possibly his primary recruiter, using her professional background to identify suitable targets and her position in families to provide access and legitimacy. What about Jessica, Nathan's wife in Nevada? We haven't been able to locate Jessica Hayes. It's possible she's another victim, or she might be part of the operation. Nathan could be using the legal marriage to establish residency and financial accounts in different states. Sarah explained that building a federal case against Nathan would require coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies. The FBI was already investigating the network, but needed more evidence to make arrests that would stick. What you've discovered about Dorothy could be the breakthrough we need. If we can document Nathan and Victoria attempting to harm Dorothy, we can arrest them and potentially uncover the entire operation. What do you need from me? We need you to go undercover, in a sense. Continue acting normal while we document their activities. We'll set up surveillance on Dorothy's facility and monitor Nathan and Victoria's communications. Most importantly, we need to catch them in the act of attempting to harm Dorothy. You want to use my mother as bait? Sarah's expression was sympathetic but firm. Mr. Brennan, Dorothy is already in danger. Nathan and Victoria are going to make their move soon, probably within the next week or two. Our choice is whether that happens with law enforcement protection and documentation, or whether it happens without any safeguards at all. I understood the logic, but the idea of using Dorothy's vulnerability to catch killers made my stomach turn. Still, Sarah was right. Nathan and Victoria were going to act regardless of what we did. The only question was whether law enforcement would be ready when they moved. What kind of protection will Dorothy have? We'll place undercover agents in the facility as staff members. We'll monitor all visitors and install surveillance equipment in Dorothy's room. She'll never be alone with Nathan or Victoria unless we're watching and recording everything. I agreed to cooperate with the federal investigation, but I insisted on one condition. Emma had to know the truth about Nathan before law enforcement moved. Whatever happened to Nathan and Victoria, Emma deserved to understand what kind of man she'd planned to marry. That evening, I drove to Emma's apartment near the hospital. She was exhausted from a double shift in the emergency room, still wearing scrubs and looking forward to a quiet night at home. I hated that I was about to destroy her world, but she needed to know what we were dealing with. "Dad, what's wrong? You look terrible." I sat down at her kitchen table and pulled out the printed marriage certificate. "Emma, I need you to look at something. I need you to stay calm and listen to everything I have to say before you react." Emma took the document and studied it for a moment before the implications registered. Her face went white, and she sank into the chair across from me. "This can't be real." "It's real, sweetheart. Nathan has been married to Jessica Rodriguez for almost 5 years. They have 2 children together in Nevada." Emma stared at the paper, her hands trembling. "But that would mean everything has been a lie." I told her about finding Nathan and Victoria in my office, about the will changes, about the browser history showing research into killing elderly dementia patients. With each revelation, I watched my daughter's face cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally a cold anger that reminded me of her mother's strength. He was going to kill Grandma Dorothy? That's what the evidence suggests. Emma, there's something else. Nathan isn't his real name. He's done this before, in other cities, with other families. We think he's part of a network that targets wealthy, elderly people. Emma was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd told her. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but filled with rage. "How can I help?" "The FBI is setting up a sting operation. They want to catch Nathan and Victoria in the act of trying to harm Dorothy. But Emma, you have to keep acting normal until they make their move. Nathan can't know that you know the truth." "How long?" "Probably within the next week. They think Nathan and Victoria are getting ready to accelerate their timeline." Emma nodded, and I could see her shifting into the focused, analytical mindset that made her an excellent doctor. "Dad, there's something else you need to know. Last week, Nathan asked me about Dorothy's medications. He wanted to know about drug interactions with her dementia treatment." My blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" I thought he was just being concerned, so I explained how certain medications could be dangerous for elderly patients with cognitive issues. I even mentioned that some combinations could cause cardiac arrest that might look natural. Emma had unknowingly provided Nathan with the medical knowledge he needed to kill Dorothy without raising suspicion. The manipulation was even deeper than I'd realized. Nathan wasn't just using Emma for access to the family. He was using her medical expertise to plan the perfect murder. "Emma, that's not your fault. You couldn't have known what he was planning. I gave him a roadmap for killing my own grandmother. I reached across the table and took her hands. And now you're going to help us stop him. Thursday morning, FBI Special Agent Rachel Torres arrived at Golden Years Manor, disguised as a new nursing supervisor. She was joined by Agent Mike Sullivan, who took a position as a maintenance worker. Both agents had extensive experience with elder abuse cases and understood the delicate balance required to protect Dorothy while gathering evidence. Agent Torres briefed me on the surveillance setup. We've installed hidden cameras and audio equipment in Dorothy's room and the common areas. We've also placed trackers on Nathan and Victoria's vehicles and are monitoring their phones. What about Dorothy? Does she know what's happening? We've explained that she needs to be extra careful about signing any documents and that she should alert staff if anyone asks her to take any new medications. We can't tell her everything because of her dementia, but she understands that some people might try to trick her. The plan was for me to continue normal activities while law enforcement gathered evidence. But normal felt impossible when I knew killers were planning to murder my mother within days. Thursday evening, Victoria suggested we have dinner with Emma and Nathan. It's been too long since we've all been together as a family, she said with a smile that now looked predatory to me. We met at a steakhouse in Scottsdale, and I watched Nathan perform his charm routine with new understanding. He was solicitous toward Victoria, respectful toward me, and affectionate with Emma. To any observer, he looked like the perfect future son-in-law. Only I knew that everything about him was a carefully constructed lie. Mr. Brennan, I've been thinking about Dorothy, Nathan said over dinner. Emma mentioned that she's been having some trouble with her new medication regimen. Maybe I should stop by this weekend and see how she's doing. Emma kept her expression neutral, but I could see the effort it required. That's thoughtful, Nathan. I know Grandma Dorothy enjoys your visits. I just want to make sure she's comfortable. Sometimes elderly people don't like to admit when medications are making them feel worse. Nathan was laying the groundwork for his visit to Dorothy, establishing a caring concern that would justify spending time alone with her. I forced myself to nod approvingly. Dorothy appreciates how thoughtful you've been with her legal affairs, too. It means a lot that she has someone she can trust with those complicated documents. Nathan's smile flickered for just a moment. I just want to make sure everything is properly organized for her future care. No one wants to burden family with complicated paperwork during difficult times. The conversation continued in this vein, with Nathan positioning himself as Dorothy's devoted caretaker while laying the foundation for what I now knew would be her murder. Victoria supported his narrative, occasionally adding comments about how wonderful it was that Dorothy had someone so reliable to help her. Listening to them plan my mother's death over dinner was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. I had to maintain the facade of a grateful father-in-law while internally cataloging every word for the FBI investigation. Friday morning, Agent Torres called with an update. Nathan made a reservation for Saturday evening at Golden Years Manor. He told the staff he wants to bring Dorothy her favorite dessert and spend some quiet time with her. Saturday evening, that's when they're planning to kill her. We'll be ready. We've positioned additional agents in the facility, and we have backup units standing by. Nathan won't be alone with Dorothy for a second. I spent Friday in a state of controlled anxiety, going through the motions of normal life while knowing that everything would change in 24 hours. I reviewed quarterly reports for Phoenix Pharmaceuticals, returned phone calls from colleagues, and had a normal conversation with Emma about her residency schedule. But underneath it all, I was counting down hours until the confrontation that would either save Dorothy or expose our entire investigation. Friday evening, Victoria was unusually affectionate, suggesting we open a bottle of wine and watch a movie together. I realized she was probably feeling guilty about what was planned for Saturday, or perhaps she was nervous about the execution of their plan. Either way, her attention felt like poison. You seem tense lately, Chuck. Is work bothering you? Just the usual stress. Nothing a good weekend won't cure. Nathan and I thought we might visit Dorothy tomorrow evening. He picked up some of those chocolate cookies she loves from that bakery downtown. I nodded, knowing those cookies would likely be laced with the medication that Nathan planned to use to stop Dorothy's heart. That's thoughtful. She'll enjoy the company. We should probably go together. Make it a family visit. Victoria was inviting me to witness Dorothy's murder, possibly thinking that having me present would make the death appear more natural and above suspicion. The audacity was breathtaking, but I kept my reaction neutral. I'd like that. What time were you thinking? Nathan suggested around 8 o'clock. Visiting hours end at 9, so it won't be a long visit. 1 hour to kill my mother. That's how long Nathan estimated he would need. Saturday dragged endlessly. I spent the morning at the gym trying to work off nervous energy, then met Dave Rodriguez for lunch. Dave knew about the investigation and could see the strain I was under. How are you holding up? 24 hours ago, I thought I had a normal family. Tonight, I'm going to watch federal agents arrest my wife and daughter's fiancé for planning to murder my mother. How do you think I'm holding up? This isn't your fault, Chuck. These people are professionals. They've done this before, and they'll do it again if they're not stopped. I keep thinking about Emma. How does she recover from something like this? How does she ever trust anyone again? Emma's strong. She's got your backbone and her mother's heart. She'll survive this, and she'll be grateful that you protected Dorothy. That evening, Victoria dressed carefully for our visit to Golden Years Manor, choosing a conservative blue dress that made her look trustworthy and maternal. Nathan arrived at our house promptly at 7:30, carrying a bag from Dorothy's favorite bakery and wearing an expression of genuine concern. "How's Dorothy been feeling today?" he asked as we drove to the facility. "She had a good morning, according to the staff," I replied. "Alert and comfortable." "That's wonderful. I brought those chocolate chip cookies she mentioned liking. I thought they might brighten her evening." I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Nathan holding the bag of cookies, knowing they contained enough medication to kill a healthy adult, let alone an elderly woman with a heart condition. In a few hours, this normal-looking young man would be in federal custody, charged with conspiracy to commit murder. We arrived at Golden Years Manor at exactly 8 o'clock. The facility seemed quiet and normal, but I knew that FBI agents were positioned throughout the building, monitoring our every move. Dorothy was in her room, sitting by the window, watching the evening light fade over the desert. "Nathan, Victoria, Chuck, what a lovely surprise." Nathan kissed Dorothy's forehead and presented the bag of cookies with theatrical flourish. "I brought your favorites, Grandma Dorothy. The lady at the bakery said these were made fresh this afternoon." Dorothy's eyes lit up with genuine pleasure. "You're such a thoughtful boy. Should I save them for later, or can we share them now?" "Why don't we share them now?" Nathan suggested, beginning to remove the cookies from the bag. "I thought we could have a little party, just the four of us." I watched Nathan's hands as he arranged the cookies on a plate Dorothy kept by her window. His movements were careful, deliberate, and I realized he was probably selecting specific cookies that contained the lethal medication. "Nathan, before we eat, I want to talk to you about something," I said, moving to position myself between him and Dorothy. Nathan looked up, his expression curious but alert. "Of course, Mr. Brennan. What's on your mind?" "I want to talk about Jessica." The change in Nathan's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. His charming mask dropped completely, replaced by the cold calculation of a predator who realized his cover was blown. Victoria went rigid in her chair, her eyes darting between Nathan and the door. "I don't know what you mean," Nathan said slowly. I pulled out the marriage certificate and placed it on Dorothy's bedside table. "Jessica Rodriguez Hayes, your wife of 5 years, the mother of your 2 children in Nevada." Nathan stared at the document, his mind clearly racing through options. Dorothy looked confused, looking back and forth between Nathan and the papers. "Chuck, what's going on?" Victoria asked, but her voice carried no surprise, only wariness. "What's going on, Victoria, is that I know about the plan to kill my mother tonight. I know about the medications in those cookies. I know about the forged will documents and the life insurance changes. I know about Martha Goldstein, Robert Winchester, and Patricia Hughes." Nathan's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, and I tensed, wondering if he was carrying a weapon. But before he could complete the motion, FBI agent Torres stepped through Dorothy's door, followed by Agent Sullivan and 2 additional agents. "Nathan Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft," Agent Torres announced, drawing her weapon. "Step away from Mrs. Brennan and place your hands behind your back." Nathan's shoulders sagged in defeat, but Victoria jumped to her feet, her face twisted with rage. "You bastard!" she screamed at me. "You have no idea what you've done. Nathan, tell him about the others. Tell him about what happens to people who interfere with our business." "Victoria Brennan, you're also under arrest," Agent Sullivan said, moving to restrain her as she tried to reach the door. As the agents handcuffed Nathan and Victoria, Dorothy watched with wide, confused eyes. "Chuck, I don't understand. What's happening? Why are these people arresting Nathan?" I sat down beside her and took her hand. "Mom, these people were trying to hurt you. They wanted to steal your money, and they wanted to hurt you. But Nathan is such a nice boy. He's going to marry Emma." "No, Mom. Nathan is already married to someone else. He was lying to all of us." Agent Torres was reading Nathan his rights when he suddenly looked up at me with a cold smile. "You think you've won something, old man? You have no idea how many people are involved in this operation. Jessica isn't my wife. She's my handler. There are 12 families just like yours being worked right now across 6 states. Victoria laughed bitterly from where she was being restrained. "You destroyed your own daughter's life for nothing, Chuck. Emma will never forgive you for ruining her chance at happiness." "Emma already knows the truth about Nathan," I replied. "She knows everything." Nathan's confident expression faltered for the first time. "That's impossible. Emma loves me. Emma loves who she thought you were. But she's a doctor, Nathan. When I showed her your research into medication interactions that could kill elderly dementia patients, she understood immediately what you were planning." Agent Torres finished reading Nathan his rights and turned to me. "Mr. Brennan, we need you to come with us for a formal statement. We also need to secure those cookies as evidence." As Nathan and Victoria were led away in handcuffs, I stayed with Dorothy until a social worker from Adult Protective Services arrived to explain what would happen next. Dorothy's dementia made it difficult for her to process the evening's events, but she seemed to understand that bad people had been trying to hurt her, and that she was now safe. "Will I see Nathan again?" she asked as the social worker helped her prepare for bed. "No, Mom. Nathan won't be visiting anymore." "That's probably for the best. I never really liked those cookies he brought." I spent 3 hours at the FBI field office providing a detailed statement about Nathan and Victoria's activities. Agent Torres explained that the investigation was much larger than I'd realized. Nathan Morrison is part of a criminal network that's been operating for at least 5 years. They've stolen millions of dollars from elderly victims and are suspected in at least 15 deaths across 6 states. Your cooperation has given us the evidence we need to arrest the leadership of the entire organization. What about Jessica Hayes? We arrested Jessica in Nevada 2 hours ago. It turns out she's the operational coordinator for the network. She recruits the male operatives, identifies target families, and coordinates the financial aspects of the cons. Nathan was just one of her employees. The scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. Jessica Hayes ran what amounted to a murder-for-hire company specializing in elderly victims. She recruited charming sociopaths like Nathan, provided them with false identities and backgrounds, then deployed them against carefully researched, wealthy families. Victoria had been recruited 3 years earlier and had been feeding Jessica information about potential targets she encountered through her pharmaceutical sales contacts. My marriage to Victoria hadn't been love. It had been a professional infiltration designed to give the criminal network access to Phoenix's wealthy retiree community. How many other families were they targeting here? At least 6 that we know of. Victoria had provided detailed financial profiles on several elderly clients from her pharmaceutical days. Nathan's engagement to Emma was just the first phase of a plan to work multiple families simultaneously. I left the FBI office at 2 a.m., emotionally drained and physically exhausted. Emma was waiting for me at my house, sitting in the kitchen with a pot of coffee and red eyes that showed she'd been crying. "How's Grandma Dorothy?" "She's safe. Confused, but safe. How are you doing?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. "I keep thinking about all the times Nathan asked me medical questions, about drug interactions, about how to make deaths look natural, about which medications elderly people take. I thought he was just curious about my work." "Emma, there was no way you could have known." I gave him the information he needed to kill people, Dad. How many victims died because I answered Nathan's questions? I sat down across from her and took her hands. Emma, listen to me. These people are professionals. If you hadn't answered Nathan's questions, he would have found the information somewhere else. You didn't enable anything. You were another victim of their manipulation. I was going to marry him. I thought I loved him. You loved who you thought he was. That person never existed. Emma wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression of grim determination that reminded me of her mother. What happens now? Now we help the FBI build cases against everyone involved in this network, and we make sure Dorothy is protected and cared for, and we rebuild our family without the people who tried to destroy it. The trials began 6 months later. Nathan Morrison pled guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Victoria was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and elder abuse and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Jessica Hayes fought the charges but was ultimately convicted on racketeering charges that covered the entire criminal network. She received life in prison for organizing and coordinating what prosecutors called the most extensive elder abuse and murder conspiracy in American history. 12 other members of the network were arrested and convicted on various charges, ranging from identity theft to murder. The investigation recovered more than $8 million in stolen assets, which was returned to victim families. Emma testified at Nathan's trial, describing how he had manipulated her medical knowledge to plan murders. Her testimony was crucial in establishing the premeditation that made the difference between conviction for fraud and conviction for first-degree murder. He didn't just lie to me about who he was, Emma told the jury. He used my love for my profession and my desire to help people as a weapon against innocent victims. He turned my medical knowledge into a tool for murder. The trial was difficult for Emma, but I was proud of her strength and courage in confronting the truth about Nathan. She finished her residency and was accepted into a fellowship program in emergency medicine. More importantly, she began dating Dr. Kevin Martinez, a fellow resident whose background we thoroughly investigated before I gave my approval. Dorothy's condition gradually stabilized after Nathan and Victoria's arrest. The stress and confusion of their manipulation had been exacerbating her dementia symptoms. With proper care and the removal of that constant psychological pressure, she became more alert and engaged. I moved Dorothy back into my home with full-time nursing care. She had good days and difficult days, but she never again had to worry about people trying to exploit her vulnerability. A year after the arrests, I received a letter from Sandra Goldstein, the daughter of Martha Goldstein, Nathan's victim in San Diego. Mr. Brennan, the letter read, I wanted to thank you for having the courage to expose Nathan Morrison and his network. My mother's death devastated our family, not just because we lost her, but because we never understood how she could have changed her will to benefit a stranger. Learning that she was the victim of a professional criminal enterprise has helped us find peace with her memory. Your actions not only saved your own mother, but gave justice to mine. Similar letters arrived from other victim families. Robert Winchester's son wrote to thank me for proving that his father's death hadn't been an accident. Patricia Hughes's niece expressed gratitude for the return of stolen assets that allowed her to complete her education. The investigation also prevented future crimes. FBI analysis of Jessica Hayes' records revealed detailed plans to target elderly residents in retirement communities across the Southwest. 23 potential victims were identified and warned before they could be approached by the criminal network. I spent considerable time working with Adult Protective Services and the FBI to develop training programs for nursing home staff and family members to recognize signs of elder financial abuse. The Dorothy Protocol became a standard screening process used in assisted living facilities nationwide. Emma and I developed a closer relationship through the shared experience of confronting Nathan's deception. She began calling me more frequently, including me in decisions about her career and personal life, and we started taking annual trips to visit places her mother had wanted to see. "I think Mom would be proud of how we handled this," Emma said during one of our conversations. She always said that family meant protecting each other, especially when it was difficult. "Your mother was the strongest person I ever knew. She would definitely be proud of how you testified against Nathan, knowing how much it hurt. And she'd be proud of how you protected Grandma Dorothy. You could have confronted Nathan and Victoria immediately, but you stayed calm and built a case that put them away forever." 2 years after Nathan's arrest, I received an unexpected call from Agent Torres. "Mr. Brennan, I wanted to give you an update on something that might interest you. We've identified 3 additional criminal networks operating similar elder abuse schemes. In each case, investigators used techniques and awareness training that came directly from your case." "How many victims were protected?" 47 elderly potential victims were identified and safeguarded before they could be harmed. 18 members of these copycat networks have been arrested and convicted. The ripple effects of exposing Nathan and Victoria's conspiracy extended far beyond my family. The case had helped law enforcement understand how these criminal networks operated and had provided tools for protecting other vulnerable elderly people across the country. Dorothy lived for 3 more years after Nathan's arrest, spending her final time in comfort and security, surrounded by family who genuinely loved her. She died peacefully at home, with Emma and me holding her hands, her estate intact and her dignity preserved. At Dorothy's funeral, I reflected on everything that had happened since that evening I found Nathan and Victoria in my office. A criminal conspiracy that could have destroyed my family and killed my mother had instead become the catalyst for a national effort to protect elderly Americans from financial predators. Emma spoke at the service about how Dorothy's strength and love had inspired our family to fight for justice. Grandma Dorothy survived the Great Depression, World War II, and raising 5 children during difficult times. She wasn't going to let some criminals steal her final years of peace and security. After the funeral, Emma and I drove to the cemetery where her mother was buried. We hadn't visited together in several years, but facing Dorothy's death had reminded us both of how precious and fragile family bonds can be. "I think I understand now why you and Mom worked so hard to build financial security," Emma said as we stood by her mother's grave. "It wasn't just about money. It was about dignity and independence and the ability to make your own choices about how to live." That's exactly right. Nathan and Victoria weren't just trying to steal money. They were trying to steal Dorothy's right to control her own life. As we drove home from the cemetery, Emma told me about her plans to specialize in emergency medicine for elderly patients. "I want to use what I learned from Nathan's manipulation to help other families recognize when their elderly relatives might be in danger." "Your mother would love that. She always said you'd find a way to help people." Looking back on everything that happened, I understand that my family was targeted by professional criminals who had successfully destroyed many other families before they reached us. Nathan Morrison and Victoria had killed at least 4 elderly people and stolen millions of dollars using techniques they had perfected over years of practice. But they made one critical miscalculation. They assumed that a 64-year-old pharmaceutical executive would be easy to manipulate and control. They didn't realize that my industry background had taught me to recognize deception, to gather evidence methodically, and to build alliances with the right people to achieve difficult objectives. Most importantly, they underestimated the strength of genuine family bonds. Emma's love for Dorothy motivated her to overcome the betrayal and heartbreak of Nathan's deception. My responsibility to protect Dorothy gave me the focus and determination to build a case that would put the criminals away permanently. The network that Nathan and Victoria belong to is gone. Jessica Hayes will never again coordinate murders of elderly victims. The techniques they used have been exposed and countered by law enforcement across the country. Dozens of potential victims have been protected because of what we learned about how these criminals operate. Emma is now Dr. Emma Brennan, an attending physician in emergency medicine at Phoenix General Hospital. She married Dr. Kevin Martinez last year in a small ceremony at the church, where her mother's funeral was held. Kevin is a good man, patient, honest, hardworking, and completely devoted to Emma. I know this because I spent 6 months investigating his background before I agreed to walk Emma down the aisle. Trust is something our family approaches differently now. We verify financial advisors, research medical providers, and maintain detailed records of all important transactions. Emma and Kevin have asked me to help them establish security protocols for their own future family, understanding that wealth and success can make people targets for those who would exploit trust and family bonds. I continue to consult for Phoenix Pharmaceuticals and work with Elder Protection Services on fraud prevention programs. The work gives me purpose and helps other families avoid what we experienced. But my primary focus remains on family, spending time with Emma and Kevin, traveling to places Dorothy always wanted to visit, and building the kind of legacy that honors both Dorothy's memory and Emma's mother's values. Sometimes I think about Victoria and whether any part of our 8-year marriage was real. Agent Torres told me that Victoria had been reporting on potential targets for 3 years before Nathan appeared in our lives, which means she had been planning to exploit my family almost from the beginning of our relationship. But I don't spend much time on those questions anymore. The important thing is that Dorothy lived her final years in dignity and security. Emma found her strength and purpose in confronting evil, and dozens of other families were protected from the criminals who tried to destroy us. Nathan Morrison will spend the rest of his life in federal prison, never again able to charm his way into families to exploit their love and trust. Victoria will be in her 70s when she's eligible for parole, too old to participate in the kind of long-term infiltration she specialized in. Jessica Hayes will die in prison, her network dismantled, and her methods exposed. The quiet revenge I achieved wasn't about anger or retribution. It was about patience, preparation, and working within the legal system to ensure that justice protected not just my family, but everyone who might have been victimized in the future. Family means protecting those who can't protect themselves. It means having the wisdom to recognize threats and the courage to confront them, even when confrontation is difficult and painful. Most importantly, it means understanding that real love requires vigilance, not blind trust. Dorothy's estate was ultimately worth $3.7 million after investment growth during the legal proceedings. Emma inherited everything, as Dorothy had always intended. Emma has used part of that inheritance to establish the Dorothy Brennan Foundation, which provides legal assistance to families dealing with elder financial abuse. The foundation has helped more than 200 families recover stolen assets and has trained thousands of caregivers to recognize signs of elder exploitation. Every year, on the anniversary of Nathan's arrest, Emma and I attend the Foundation's annual conference, where families share stories of survival and victory over those who would prey on the elderly. That's how this story ends, not with vengeance or violence, but with justice served and future victims protected. Nathan Morrison thought he could exploit our family's love and trust to commit murder and theft. Instead, our family's strength became the foundation for protecting hundreds of other families from similar criminals. Sometimes the best revenge is simply ensuring that evil never wins again.